The B-52 Stratofortress is a colossal aircraft and dominates the sky whenever it's in flight. It's a sheer signal of incredible American strength and military superiority, and has been in service since the Cold War. Remarkably, 744 of these huge planes have been made, and its purpose as a bomber aircraft has seen it deployed in many different conflicts. However, today, we look at the remarkably tragic story of the Fairchild Air Force Base crash that occurred on the 24th of June 1944. Footage of the incident was shown worldwide to much shock, and today the crash is remembered for the deaths of all 4 crew members on board. So join us today as we look at the tragic story of the B-52 aircraft, Cesar 52. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The Stratofortress, as it's known due to its size, has been operated by the United States Air Force since the 1950s. It is capable of carrying up to 70,000 pounds of weapons, and has a typical combat range of 8,800 miles, a huge range without having to refuel. It was built during the Cold War to carry nuclear weapons, and to perform deterrence missions, and today 58 remain in active service. Their good performance at high subsonic speeds and relatively low operating costs have kept them in service, even though more advanced bombers have been developed by the American military. When seeing a B-52, you can't help but stand in awe at its sheer size, being almost 50 metres long. The wingspan is also colossal, and if you saw one of these coming towards you, you would certainly go into a panic. During the Cold War, the B-52 would perform airborne alert patrols in case a nuclear attack was launched, and they also loitered at high altitudes near to the borders of the Soviet Union to provide a rapid first strike or retaliation on the Soviets in case the US was bombed. They shifted to become a low-level bomber at times during the standoff due to the threat that surface-to-air missiles posed to high-altitude aircraft. This change was rather successful, with the B-52's flexibility managing to outlast other contemporary military aircraft. B-52s were also used heavily as a bombing aircraft during the Vietnam War, and they underwent modifications to allow them to carry more bombs and carry out carpet bombing operations. Following this conflict, they also played a vital part in Operation Desert Storm during the Gulf War and flew many bombing missions over Iraq, moving back to a high altitude role. As with all military aircraft, they need a huge degree of maintenance, checking and also training to make sure they are safe. On the 24th of June 1944, a United States Air Force B-52H Stratofortress bomber crew based at Fairchild Air Force Base prepared to practice an aircraft demonstration flight for an airshow that was due to take place the next day. On board were pilots Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bud Holland, aged 46, Lieutenant Colonel Mark McGeehan, aged 38, Colonel Robert Wolfe, aged 46, and Weapons Systems Officer and Radar Navigator Lieutenant Colonel Ken Huston, aged 41. Holland was the designated aircraft commander for the flight, and McGeehan was acting as co-pilot, with Wolfe being the safety observer. All of the crew were relatively experienced too, and had served for a number of years. The mission plan for their flight called for a number of low altitude passes, 60-degree bank turns, a steep climb and a touch and go landing on runway 23. The flight was going to be one of Wolfe's final flights, with many of his friends and family gathering close by near the airfield to watch and take part in ceremonies afterwards. McGeehan's wife and youngest 2 sons were also watching the flight from their living quarters nearby. The B-52 with the call sign Cesar 52 took off at 13:58 and completed most of the elements of the mission without any bother or problems. Before preparing to complete the touch and go on runway 23 at the end of the practice, the aircraft was told to go around due to another aircraft on the runway having just landed. With Holland maintaining an altitude of 250 feet above ground level, he radioed the control tower and asked to execute a 360-degree left turn, which was granted by the controller. The B-52 then began the 360-degree left turn around the tower, starting from the midfield point of the runway. Just behind the tower was an area of restricted airspace, as apparently it was above a nuclear weapons storage facility. In order to avoid flying through this restricted airspace, Holland then flew the aircraft into an incredibly tight and steep bank turn, whilst maintaining the low 250 feet altitude. It was at this point where tragedy struck. Approximately at 3/4 of the way around the turn, at 14:16 PM, the aircraft banked past 90 degrees and rapidly began to descend towards the ground. It then clipped power lines and smashed into the ground, exploding and instantly killing the 4 crew members on board. McGeehan was sitting apparently in an ejector seat, but apparently had only partially ejected at the time of the impact, and the medical investigation didn't state whether he managed to clear the aircraft or not. Radar navigator Ken Huston was also sitting in an ejection seat, but he did not initiate the ejection sequence in time. Upon hitting the ground, 1 airman was also injured who was observing the flight. Immediately an investigation was launched as to what went wrong with the flight of Cesar 52. A report was released in early 1995 after a final evaluation of the safety investigation. The report identified a number of different factors which contributed to the aircraft's crashing, including the actual crash sequence, the personality and early behaviour of pilot Bud Holland, a lack of corrective action by the United States Air Force over Holland's conduct, mission planning and execution, and other human and environmental factors. As the B-52 entered its final turn sequence, the airspeed indicator was showing 182 knots, and although Holland increased the engine power after starting the turn, it was too late to maintain the aircraft's airspeed. The aircraft's speed decreased to the point where the plane was turning extremely and dangerously slow. The angle of the bank being at least 60 degrees caused the aircraft to stall, and it would never be able to recover its speed and altitude, and subsequently plummeted into the ground. Now, another point in the report also was the fact that Colonel Holland's personality as a macho daredevil significantly influenced the crash. He had developed a reputation as an aggressive pilot who often broke flight safety rules, and this included flying below minimum clearance altitudes and also exceeding bank angle limitations. A previous incident had taken place where Holland executed a steep bank turn that went wrong, leading to his B-52 that day entering a death spiral, losing 1,000 feet of altitude before miraculously being able to recover from the spin. He would also later be reprimanded for completing other unsafe manoeuvres like this. On the 14th of April 1993, he was a commander of a 2-plane training mission to a bombing range near Guam. During this mission he flew his B-52 closer to the other B-52s than the regulations allowed, and Holland also asked his navigator to video the bombs falling from the aircraft from inside the bomb bay, which was completely against regulations and safety. At the Fairchild Air Show a year before the crash, he would do another dangerous bank turn in the B-52, causing fuel to flow out through vent holes from the aircraft's wing tanks, such was the steepness of the manoeuvre. On the 10th of March 1994, Holland commanded a single aircraft training mission to the Yakima bombing range to provide a photographer with a chance to snap the plane as it dropped its bombs. The altitude that the plane was allowed to be in that area was to remain at 500 feet above ground level. However, Holland's aircraft was filmed at one point, being 30 feet from the ground. This even caused the photography crew to stop filming as they feared for their safety. The co-pilot even tried to grab the controls to prevent Holland from flying the aircraft, such was the danger. So he had a hugely poor reputation for safety, and no doubt his actions and mentality caused Cesar 52 to crash. Other factors would be highlighted, such as the fact that another pilot was scheduled to fly the mission, but he was unavailable. Also, all the crew on board had only limited flying time in the months immediately before the accident, and none of them seemed to notice that the aircraft stalled before impact. A shooting that occurred 4 days before the incident at Fairchild, which resulted in the deaths of 5 people, also was said to be a major distraction for the personnel based there. The conclusion of the report though would primarily pin blame on Holland the pilot. Following the crash, the pilot, who should have been completing the flight, would plead guilty at court-martial proceedings for dereliction of duty. Although the accident did occur, it was found that procedures and policies were in place to prevent a crash like this happening again in the future. The footage of the crash would be used worldwide, and today it's used as a military training and teaching case study, reinforcing the importance of enforcing safety regulations and rules. The 1994 Fairchild Air Force Base crash involving the Stratofortress Cesar 52 was extremely avoidable. The pilot that day was incredibly negligent and stupid when it came to safety measures, and without this ridiculous attitude, then the lives of 3 other men would have been saved. It's a crash that's remembered today for the incompetence and recklessness of a pilot who seemed more bothered to do daring stunts in extremely dangerous ways than protecting his crew. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thanks for watching.